Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast Too Much Disinformation, the pod that uncovers the good, the bad, and the fake of the online world. I'm your host, Rafi Mendelson, and on today's pod, we're going to be discussing Deceptive Imagery Persuasion, or DIP. What is it? Where does it take its role in the world of disinformation and how we should think about it? And leading us and explaining this concept is Ryan McBeth. And Ryan is the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the OSINT intelligence world. His educational videos about software, the military, and open source intelligence are so popular that his YouTube channel has over 750,000 subscribers who have collectively watched his videos nearly 400 million times. Ryan spent 20 years as an anti-armor and heavy weapons infantryman, which when you add to his degrees in cybersecurity and software development, and then you sprinkle on his infectious curiosity and storytelling skills, make quite the combination that results in informative and hilarious videos. So without further ado, let's start the show. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Rafi, thank you so much for inviting me on this show. I can't wait to talk to you about this. I'm really passionate about cybersecurity and also talking about deceptive imagery persuasion.
Great. I can't wait to get into it. I've really been looking forward to this conversation and kind of going through it with you because every video you make is interesting, informative, has lots of people talking about it and commenting on it. So I'm looking forward to the pearls of wisdom you're going to share with us today. But before we get into that, I just want to ask you one question, the same question that we ask every guest that comes on is what was your first ever social media platform?
Boy, you know what? I think my first ever social media platform was probably a BBS, an online bulletin board service. And this was back in the 80s. So I would have to say that my first, really, it was probably CompuServe. Now that I think of it, that was probably my first online social media platform. CompuServe was one of the first access platforms out of a walled garden that was similar to America Online. So it was honestly probably CompuServe of all things.
Nice.
Yeah.
And we're going to get straight into the topic because we've got a lot to uncover and it's going to cover a whole wide range of things. And I think for many people listening or watching, they may not have heard this term. So it's DIP, Deceptive Imagery Persuasion. And it's actually a term that you came up with, right?
Yes. So deceptive imagery persuasion is when you take any kind of imagery and add text or add missing or add something that isn't contextual to that specific image to try to influence someone's opinion. Even something like Betty White can be deceptive imagery persuasion, where you might have a picture of Betty White and you have her saying a quote that sounds like it might have come from her or that you really want to have come from her. And I think that's what makes DIP so powerful because you want to believe. It's one of those things that you want this to be true so badly, and it's virtually frictionless to like and to share this thing, and other people can get infected by this deceptive imagery as well.
Nice. And how does that differ to the terms fake news or propaganda that is often is very popularized and is often referenced?
Well, I think there's I would say there's two types of propaganda, right? There is the kind of propaganda that's misinformation, disinformation, that's designed to make somebody influence someone's decision or influence how somebody feels about a certain topic. And what's the second type of propaganda? Branding, right? So that's like Coca-Cola. That's branding, where if I buy Coca-Cola, I know exactly what I'm getting. So a brand is really a contract between the producer and the consumer of quality, right? When I buy Coca-Cola, I know what I'm getting. But deceptive imagery persuasion, it has a little bit of propaganda to it, but it doesn't have any of the branding part to it, right? So you have this standalone thing, this standalone image that is designed to influence your behavior, either into sharing that thing or into changing your opinion or believing what is in that particular that particular image is true. So I think that's kind of the difference there. Fake news, there's a lot of effort that might go into creating an article that is inaccurate. But with deceptive imagery persuasion, I just got to go and get a picture of Donald Trump and throw up a quote that he did not say, but people might think he would say, to influence people into thinking a certain way about the former president of the United States. So that's kind of the difference there.
And did you coin the term because it's something that is new that you're seeing, or just because there wasn't a term that kind of addressed everything that you just explained?
There was really no term out there for it, and saying deceptive imagery persuasion, it's a very accurate way of explaining what you're seeing, and it's something that's very easy to put into a report, DIP. Mm-hmm. So, someone can just throw that into an intelligence report and instantly know, okay, this was a fake picture or this was a real picture with added fake context to make people believe something. So yeah, I did come up with that because I needed a way to explain things in reports whenever I did work for, I do occasional work for a private intelligence company called Velocity. And, on occasion, it was actually, we were covering an exercise for in South America. It was called Unitas, which is this yearly exercise. And we thought there would be all sorts of deceptive imagery persuasion coming from China, mainly, because one of the purposes of Unitas is to train the various South American navies in how to use USVs, unmanned surface vehicles, naval ships, to help detect Chinese fishing trawlers. And we thought there would be this whole Chinese effort to say America is about to invade Venezuela. None of that happened. There was a little bit of that. And that's actually, why not? Well, honestly, that was another theory I had. It was called hardpoints. You know how on a jet fighter, you have a jet fighter, and the jet fighter has racks that can hold bombs or missiles or whatever. Mm-hmm. Let's say an F-16 has, I think, 7 hard points, on the wingtips and in the middle of the wing and in the center line, right? Well, when you think about it, deceptive practices online, those have hard points as well. It's the person. Mm. So sometimes you have bots, like actual computer programs that are spitting generated content out. But a lot of times you have people, and you pay these people a certain number of rubles an hour, and they come up with, they can only do so much. Mm-hmm. They can only get out 8 tweets an hour, 12 tweets an hour, 8 posts, and it takes a toll on your brain, mm-hmm. right? So that's a hard point. You can only have so much influence come out of that one specific launcher, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why. It's because roughly around the same time, the United States had an exercise in Europe, Operation Atlantic Resolve. This is a yearly exercise, and basically the U.S. activates a bunch of reservists that have a special kind of job, or MOS, that moves, they move stuff by rail. Well, that isn't an active duty thing in the U.S. Army. It's a reservist thing. So Atlantic Resolve was going on. A bunch of reservists were activated, and I think Russia was looking at Unitas, and they're looking at Atlantic Resolve, and they're like, well, let's go with Atlantic Resolve. We only have so many hard points that we can launch misinformation from. Atlantic Resolve has the better bang for the buck because these reservists were getting activated to go over. And that, when people start, and at least I know in Israel, like, reservists get called up all the time. In America, when reservists get called up, it's usually a big deal.
And a sign of things to come.
Well, outside of the National Guard or things like, because in the American military, we have like a dual system where you have Federal Reserves and you have National Guard, which is kind of like the state army, which is part-time. And occasionally, if there's a fire or a flood, just recently there was a wildfire in Hawaii. The National Guard will get in their helicopters. They'll go fight the fire. They'll create fire lines. But activating the National Guard to go overseas, like, people start going crazy when you hear about that. So that was ripe for disinformation. And actually, the Hawaiian wildfires were ripe for disinformation as well. There was some neat stuff going on there too.
I think the way you outlined kind of those two operations, and then there's only a certain amount of resources, only a certain amount of hard points. I think that's one of the things that people really appreciate about your videos is that you attempt to kind of draw back the curtain to give an insight into or an understanding of how operationally these things happen. What are the things that we're seeing, and then how does that fit within a kind of wider the wider context? So I suppose one of the things that I was thinking about, coming into this conversation was you've been studying this for years. How has that changed? How has it evolved from an operational, from an organizational point of view?
That's actually a really good question. I think that it's evolved in the sense that it's a lot easier to fool people because fewer people join the military. And when you have a country, like Israel, I know you're in Israel right now. In Israel, everybody, I think, except the Hasid, has to join the military. So people in Israel, they're good. You can say, hey, these cluster munitions were used against civilians. And an Israeli who was in the military, I go, well, that's not a cluster munition. That looks like a cluster munition. Cluster munitions. Well, in America, only 0.5% of anybody has ever served in the military. And we're not even talking the Army. We're talking the military. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, Coast Guard. 0.5%. So it's very easy for someone who wants to spread disinformation or use deceptive imagery persuasion to say, America is sending Western tanks over to Ukraine, and then show a picture of a self-propelled artillery piece. Mm-hmm. Average Israeli is going to look at that and go, that's an M109. I fired that thing. Average American, well, tank's a tank. It's got tracks, it's got a gun, that must be a tank. They said it's a tank, therefore it's a tank. Mm-hmm. So it's actually gotten a lot easier to deceive people. And another way, I blame video games as well. Video games are a huge problem because people will play a video game and say, well, I use this gun in this video game and it did this. Or, well, I played this video game where I called in artillery on a minefield and it cleared the minefield. And that's because these video game developers did not hire Ryan McBeth to read their script and explain to them, no, you can't do that. Because honestly, let's get real. Anybody who serves in the Army knows that 99% of everything you do is sitting around waiting for something to happen. That would make a really boring game, right? But yeah, so you might throw in stuff in a video game that isn't accurate, but people play it and they go, wow, that must be accurate. Right? That was in Call of Duty. That seems really realistic to me. So it's gotten easier to disseminate misinformation because people just don't have any touchstone or context to the disinformation that's coming at them. So it's very hard for them to process what might be real and what might not be real.
So I think that's really interesting, especially in terms of attributing the way that misinformation spreads, particularly when it comes to defense systems and for government's activity, which is such a big section of the misinformation. It's such a big part of the online conversation. But then you also gave an example at the beginning of the conversation about Betty White, right? It wasn't to do with military systems. It wasn't to do with the thing that you've been studying for 20 years in your life. It was to do with celebrities. And this is something that we see as well, is the way that it creeps into things that are real, things that are everyday. It's not just wars and armies, it's also cars, celebrities, and serials, right? So is that something where you've seen a change, or how has that evolved in terms of us believing it or not believing it?
I think the difference is that the deception had to spread manually before. One good example is just about every American, at least my age, knows that George Washington chopped down his dad's cherry tree. And then when his dad said, did you chop down this cherry tree? George Washington said, I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. I have no idea whether that actually happened or not. But I believe you can trace it all the way back to like a primer from the 1800s where there was a lesson about telling the truth all the time. Well, back then in the 1800s, you had to print a book that cost money, right? You had to print that book up, and you would have to distribute that book to all of those schoolhouses. And those schoolhouses would really have no way of confirming that thing was true, right? Because how many vendors for school books could there have possibly been back in the 19th century in America, right? You might have a couple of vendors out east, and you order a bunch of books, and those books come and you use them for the next 20 years, right? But now, I think that deceptive imagery persuasion and propaganda can spread at literally the speed of light because of that darn share button. You hit that share button, we could probably solve fake news like that if we required people to do a simple math problem before, when they hit the share button. It doesn't even have to be a hard math problem. It could just be, what is 4 plus 4? What is 3 plus or maybe a little bit harder. Like, what is 27 divided by 9? And you got to I don't feel like sharing this. So that could actually, something like that could actually probably slow the spread of misinformation. Just making people do a short math problem or answer a question before sharing something. I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to share it that badly. It's the ease of sharing and the speed of sharing and the networks that we've developed that have caused this to spread like wildfire.
And ultimately the networks that are being utilized by malicious actors for their gain, right?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't even know that they're being used. And when you get a picture that says a cluster bomb was used against Ukrainian civilians, and you look at that picture and you see 2 submunitions the size of dinner plates. Well, you might not necessarily know what a cluster bomb looks like, but those dinner plates look like bombs, right? Kind of like the little platters that might be mines or something. And you might just, what? Oh my God, the Ukrainians are using cluster munitions. I'm going to share this. Like, can you believe this? I thought cluster munitions were banned, right? And I can take a look at that and go, that's not a cluster munition. That's a Smart 155 round that's made by Germany. It's 155 millimeter shell that it's an anti-tank shell that uses infrared to kind of guide itself down. There just happen to be 2 of them in there, and they guide themselves down to the heat source of a tank. Well, I know that, right? But it's very difficult to compete with somebody who is looking at that picture. The picture is labeled cluster bomb. They have nothing in their life experience that would say otherwise. And boom, now they share it with their whole network. Now you've infected another 3,000 people.
Just short of enlisting everyone in the army in order to overcome that, as you mentioned, and short of kind of educating everyone on every single facet. And I know it's something that you've given a lot of thought because it's a big part of your educational aspect of your videos, is how do you then counter that? How can we build up kind of an antibody against that?
Antibody is actually a very good analogy. How do you build it up? A lot of it is personal responsibility, right? Like take your, how do you stay healthy? All right, well, you take your vitamins every day, you eat your vegetables, you exercise every day, right? So those are 3 ways of maybe keeping your body healthy. So one of the ways is you got to read. You got to read nonfiction, and you got to read about different topics. So that way, I have books from everything from Moshe Dayan's biography to a history of salt. I will read about anything. It doesn't matter. I actually have a book about the history of boy bands. And one day I might need that knowledge, and I'll be able to go, I read a book about the history of boy bands. And technically in Korea, boy bands, individual members can be replaced, but the band stays the same because different members go off to military service in Korea and they're replaced by somebody else. So the way to inoculate yourself is with knowledge. Read. Literally any moment you have where you're not occupying your time, if you're in the car, instead of listening to music, listen to an audiobook. A lot of it's personal responsibility. The price of freedom is internal vigilance, right? It's eternal vigilance, and a lot of that comes down to personal responsibility.
When it comes to what you're seeing out there, you spend a lot of your time tracking conversations. You spend a lot of your time investigating who might be behind that.
Yeah.
What worries you as we stand now, kind of almost just after mid 2023? What is it you're seeing that you're kind of worried about, or that you're thinking, okay, I need to pay particular attention to that over the coming months?
That's that. I think the biggest thing that worries me are the platforms, the social media platforms that know this is going on and won't do anything about it. That allow people to continue pushing narratives that are obviously fake and not changing that because it draws engagement. Tucker Carlson, American commentator, conservative guy. New York Times, liberal newspaper. What's the one thing that both of those organizations have in common? They both like money, right? They both like money. That's one thing Tucker Carlson and the New York Times can agree on. Money is great. So if you're a company like Twitter, or I think Twitter is X, or Facebook, you have the tools at your disposal to find and eliminate inauthentic accounts. I'm not even saying accounts where people are posting opinions that are contrarian, but obviously 100% inauthentic accounts. But these companies are not cracking down on bots, and it's because it creates engagement. It gets people mad. It gets people commenting. The more people are commenting, the more that they're going back and they're refreshing. The more ads you can sell. Hey, buy the Lexus, buy the Coca-Cola. Let me show you this other thing that's going to get you mad, keep you engaged, keep you on your phone. So that kind of disturbs me that companies haven't haven't really taken any steps to remove bots from their platforms, at least no steps that I've seen, because I see it constantly every single day. People that are definitely inauthentic accounts.
So we often talk about, or try and we frame disinformation in terms of the ABC, the actors, behaviors, and content. And I think so far, just in this conversation, we've covered kind of all three, right? We're talking about the bots, we're talking about the kind of different behaviors, things that you're seeing. But I think in the terms of the C, what have you seen that's changed? And I suppose Gen AI is going to be part of that conversation, because that's been a big part of the change that we've seen. But what have you seen when it comes to the kind of content that's being put out there?
I think that the content has gotten more personalized. I think you have people that specialize in very specific disciplines. So you might have one person that specializes in criticizing former President Trump. You might have another person that specializes in coming up with very inaccurate but specific details about the United States military that aren't true. I mean, just a couple of days ago, there was a video about the U.S. taking over an airfield in Syria and seeing all these people running, and these American, and that came from Afghanistan 2 years ago, that particular video, right? But if you want it to be true, I think you have people that specialize in very specific things and just get better at their craft, as opposed to people who are contracted to say, hey, here's the script for today, go do this thing. So I think you're starting to see people who are specializing in very specific niches of online content and online outrage.
And we've referenced they, them, those people, malicious actors, and it's the question, and I really apologize for asking this question, because it's the question that we receive a lot as well, and it's the hardest one to do. But the question we receive is who are they? Who are those people? Who are those different groups? Is it state-backed? Is it state-owned? Is it private entities? Is it kind of guns for hire? Who is it that you're seeing, or that you think you might be seeing?
I think a lot of that depends on the country that's performing these actions. I know that China has in-house. I don't believe China contracts. They have an in-house military intelligence unit that actually puts out misinformation. So that's one way of doing it. I know that Russia tends to contract with outside agencies to actually perform this, and that's actually that actually scares me more than China, in the sense that one of the things that I can see very soon, if it isn't happening already, is you have a short seller who wants to destroy someone's stock so he can make money. Well, he might find a good example would be the issue with Bud Light. In America, there was this brand of beer called Bud Light, and there was a transgender activist that received a special can, and that blew up into this backlash over Bud Light. Well, what if you had a short seller who wanted to make money in the stock market, who went out and found stuff like that and launched it against your company using these private contractors that are coming out of Eastern Europe? Now you need to pay attention, because now it's hitting your bottom line. Now it's hitting your wallet. And you need to have a plan in place to mitigate those attacks, or to prove, hey, this is fake news. This attack was generated by this group of people. So I think right now people might look at that and go, oh, what do I care if Russia is launching these fake news attacks or this deceptive imagery persuasion? The memes are funny. Not going to be so funny when your company goes out of business or the stock drops to under $1 because of a lie that someone spread, or deceptive information persuasion that someone spread through an online campaign, an organized online campaign. And these people are organized. Carolyn Orbueno, you really should have her on your show. Carolyn Orbueno is an expert at figuring out all of these networks and putting together all these networks. And sometimes these networks start with a sentinel tweet. And you literally have one person who doesn't have a lot of followers, but that tweet comes out and everybody knows, okay, this is the person I need to follow. Hawaii, not Ukraine, was a good example of that fairly recently.
So I think what you just said, I think it's important that it's important enough that we hang on there for a minute and maybe unpack that a little bit more, explain that a little bit more, because I think the way that a lot of people out there, a lot of listeners, people are watching, might be thinking about disinformation or fake news, or there's something that is being created, that is been made up and fabricated and is now being injected into society. But I think it's such a good example of DIP is what you're actually saying is that the levels of sophistication that is happening right now means that you don't need to create things. You don't need to make things up from scratch. You can take things that are happening and then use new resources or more evolved approaches or tactics or tools or fake accounts or networks or companies that you can then employ to be able to do these kinds of things. So I think just to focus on that sophistication that we're now seeing and how DIP really unpacks that, of how we're actually taking things that are happening and then but twisting them in a different way.
And I'll give you another thing, entertaining. So, when you look at a picture of Betty White with fake text, you've just been entertained. It might be only for a couple of seconds, but you get that dopamine squirt that I've just been entertained by this funny quote that Betty White may or may not have said, but I believe she might have said. So in a situation where you have an offensive public affairs campaign against another company, you could do something as easy as paying let's say you have an influential Instagram model who does dances. She might say, hey, I found a hair in my food at McDonald's and I'm going to do a dance about it. Well, now you have a lie that's entertainment. Now, this model might have been paid thousands of dollars to say, I found a hair, or even something even worse. I found a piece of metal or a tooth. That's kind of disgusting, right? I found a tooth in my salad at McDonald's. And I'm going to do a dance with this tooth that I found. Well, now this dance, this viral dance of an attractive Instagram model is going all the way around the world. But who's it really hurting? It's hurting McDonald's, right? Now, does McDonald's have a strategy in place to deal with that and figure out, all right, what actors are sharing this person's dance to kind of figure out, like, all right, maybe this is deceptive, and actually putting together a campaign saying this person was hired by this company. We believe that these people influenced the spread of this, and here is how this happened. So if you don't have an organization at your company that can respond to that, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble in the next couple of years, because it is so easy to be deceptive, especially online, that if you don't have any defenses for it, you're going to get cold cocked.
And we're not judging here. If there is a company that hasn't really thought about it, they're a large, publicly traded, or maybe they're just not as big as that, but they have a brand presence, and they haven't set that up, and they don't feel that they're kind of prepared and ready for that. What should they be doing? How should they be thinking about it?
Well, one of the things they should probably be doing is using cyber tools. but the other thing that they should be doing is they should be creating a team. So a lot of times when you hire a social media team, you're worried about offensive social media. You're worried about showing your company in a positive light, getting out your ad campaign, getting out, here's an influencer who really liked our product, let's promote that guy. But those people don't have the defensive, combat-oriented mindset to go after people who are saying bad things about their company that are going to go viral. They might make someone aware, like, hey, this person said that the fender fell off of the new car they bought from Ford. What do we do about this? They don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But really, this is cyber warfare. The cyber guys, this is cyber warfare, corporate to corporate cyber warfare. The cyber guys need to be working with the social media guys to know what threats are coming in on the horizon, and the cyber guys need to have a team that can deal with that. So that's what companies should be doing. They should be establishing strike teams to respond to disasters like this that are really no different than having cybersecurity strike teams that are going to go in and deal with a penetration or a phishing attack. So companies need to start thinking of that, or they won't be companies.
I think this conversation has been fascinating to be able to talk about deceptive imagery persuasion. And I think and I hope that people listening are kind of now thinking, or that maybe they have a bit more, a few more tools to be able to, as they go along their day-to-day business and their interactions on social media, that they're more armed to be able to think about these things and read up on it, right? Because we have to continue learning all the time. So firstly, thank you so much for taking the time to explain all of this. And I really recommend that people check out Ryan's YouTube channel and all of his channels. But we're going to conclude with the same question we ask all of our guests that come on, is to share with us one good, one bad, and one fake thing that you're seeing in the online space today.
So I would say the one good thing that you're seeing today is Substack. I mean, I have Substack is essentially an online newsletter, an online magazine. I have a Substack, Ryan McBeth, that's substack.com. And the good thing about Substack is it allows me to post journalism, articles and videos, and actually monetize that. I make a lot of my stuff free, but I ask people, hey, give me $5 for a month. Right? I have it set as the lowest thing possible. And Substack has allowed so many writers, especially people in the open source intelligence space, to make a living doing this. One bad thing, and we covered this before, is that nobody is taking bots seriously right now. And that is bad, because it's allowing disinformation to spread. And it would be trivial to remove people who are obviously inauthentic actors. It is literally a Python script. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they could do it tomorrow. They could do it tomorrow. It's trivial. And I guess one fake thing that's been bothering me quite a lot is I mentioned this before, as we're talking a couple of weeks ago, there were Hawaii wildfires in Hawaii, and a rumor went out saying don't accept the initial payment from the government because they'll take your land and it's only $700. And this somehow made its way around the country like wildfire, and it wasn't true. And the idea that someone would refuse money, and people are actively telling people, don't accept this assistance, that should be terrifying. That should be absolutely terrifying that Americans would turn on each other like that. Especially, and one of the things that we haven't done very well, which should probably be equally as terrifying, is that we had no effort to try to squash that disinformation. The president didn't go on TV and say, "Hey, that isn't true, and here's what's actually going on." So that could be just a situation where the president might not be cognizant of the consequences of not doing something like that. But that would probably that's my one fake thing. That $700 payment thing has really bothered me.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk us through all of this. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, as I always do. And thanks for everyone for listening and watching. And have a great day. Take care.
Thank you so much, Rafi. I really appreciate it.